Well, joining us now, we have Ramona Ortega. She's the CEO and founder of Mi Dinero, Mi Futuro, or My Money, My Future, a personal finance platform that works to help Black and Latinx millennials save, invest, and build wealth. Welcome, Ramona. So happy to be talking to you this afternoon.
Yes, excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, so, we can jump right into it. First question, can you tell us more about your background and how that led to the creation of My Money, My Future?
Absolutely. So I am, third generation Mexican American out of California. So my mom was a farm worker, didn't necessarily have the opportunity to attend college. And when I grew up in the Napa Valley, I seen a lot of disparities and inequality amongst people in my family, in my community. And it was something that always sort of sat with me the wrong way. And I thought, we work so hard. There's so many people out here who are putting their lives on the front lines to come here to make a living for their families. And why are we not seeing the same opportunities? And so that stayed with me through undergrad. Originally, I was, a journalist, actually, and I came to New York to work for 60 Minutes early on. And I eventually transitioned into public policy, where I addressed some of these issues around inequality. And then eventually ended up going to law school, working on Wall Street, and being sort of inside the belly of the beast, if you will. I seen sort of what other people talked about in terms of money and intergenerational wealth, and how they use the mechanisms of Wall Street and the financial markets to build that wealth. And I thought, if not me, whom to really address this issue? And that was in, really around 2017, 2016, 2017. So we've been sort of doing this work for a while now, and now we've seen this emergence of fintech, and there's a lot more opportunities out there for us to grow that intergenerational wealth.
Can you talk to me a little bit about, you said you were working on it for a while and then it really kind of got off the ground in 2017. How long were you in Wall Street before you decided, I got to do something about this?
Sure. And so I will say this, that, it started really in public policy. I was actually working in international human rights work for many years, and specifically addressing the racial wealth gap. So in 2020, I went to South Africa. In 2002, I went to South Africa as a delegate for the World Conference Against Racism. So the Wall Street piece, I was in Wall Street for about 4 years, working in securities litigation, and worked on many cases that you probably are aware of, like Bernie Madoff. And those were the sort of, that period of time was really inspirational in terms of learning about sort of how to structure finance. And so that's when I really took the leap onto entrepreneurship. And at that time, it was really the emergence of financial technology as fintech as we know it. Since 2017, when we launched the company, I think we've just seen a huge rise in that sort of fintech space and opportunities to have technology help to build the tools that we need to build wealth.
Right, and you've talked about it already, the wage gap. It's extensive across the U.S., particularly impacting women, but even more so, taking a step further, Latino women. So, what do you think specifically stands in the way of closing that gap? Why is it so difficult here in the U.S. for us to get that closed and to have, fair pay for everybody?
Absolutely. So I'll say, even let's go a little bit broader, right? So it's not just the wage gap, it's actually the wealth gap. The wage gap, which, as we know, for Latinas is one of the worst numbers. It's like 52 cents on the dollar. And that is a huge problem. And it's a contributor to the actual racial wealth gap, right, which is net worth. So let me tackle the first one. The wage gap has a lot to do with sort of the opportunities in the market, sort of what are we negotiating in terms of salary? And that's a huge piece. What are we paying for a living wage in states, right? And that's the policy piece. And so those two really contribute highly to sort of the overall wealth gap. We have a massive wealth gap in this country, and Latinos are literally $100,000 away from parity to our counterparts, to our white counterparts. A lot of that has to do with the wage gap. Much of it has to do with intergenerational wealth transfer. And that has to do with investing and how we allocate those funds into different assets and building a portfolio, not only of real estate, but your 401k, your brokerage accounts. And all of that really depends on your ability to have money left over at the end of the day to invest. And I think that's really important. Another thing I would say is that we don't necessarily take advantage often of the 401ks that are available, or we're in jobs that don't provide it. And so a lot of states are taking action right now to make those portable 401ks available to people. I think the last numbers that we've seen was less than 30 or only 39% of Latino women were invested in their 401k. And so that's a huge part of also, bridging that that gap, on not only on the wage gap, but also on the sort of wealth gap.
Right, and so we talk about these issues that have been facing us and we do face and day to day, but right now we're also facing an economy that's headed towards recession. Do you have any financial tips, tricks, maybe a top 2 or 3 things that you think that young people especially need to be thinking about and doing as the fears surrounding the inflation and what's going on with the economy continue to rise?
Absolutely. So this is, we are in a cycle, right? And I think that the more you understand finance generally, but even personal finance, and how these macro things like a recession or inflation impact your personal finances, the more you'll be able to sort of weather the storm. So for young people, it's about starting to invest as soon as you can. As soon as you're 18, you can open an IRA. Right. So you don't even have to have a job, an employment 401k. You can start with an IRA and start investing, even if it's $50 a month. You can also start putting away money in an emergency savings account. That's really important for times like this. There's also, in terms of how long you invest, it's really important that you start early, because what you're going to be able to do is to weather the storms, and many storms will come. We've had dips in the market. This is what's called cyclical, right? These things happen. And in fact, if you're prepared and you're informed, you're able to not only plan for them, but also to take advantage of what we call those dips in the market, which we're having right now. So in terms of planning, not only for young people, it's not how much you invest, it's how long you invest. So start now. Get that information that you need. The education is out there. We just launched a large campaign to educate and activate 1 million new Black and Latino investors called Thrive. And so people can get free resources on thrivecampaign.org. And we have a financial boot camp, an investment boot camp for people to access there. So get that information that you need so that you're least sort of afraid of the markets, because sometimes because we don't understand the language or the financial jargon, we feel a lot of shame, or we feel like we're unprepared to take action. And really, inaction is one of the things that harms us the most. So we want to start taking that action early. And even if you're in your 30s and 40s, you want to start thinking about diversifying your portfolio. What are you invested in? Taking a look at that, understanding what this dip means or a recession coming in means, so that you're careful about your cash. You're putting it in places where you're going to have some safety. You're not putting too much at risk, and really understanding the different types of asset classes that are out there, including real estate and equity markets.
Right, and we talked about that wealth gap and a little bit of how it transcends across generations. For somebody who is in that mindset of, well, my grandpa was poor, my grandpa's grandpa was poor, I'm never going to be able to have that money that I wish that I had. What's your advice to them? How they get out of that mindset to then really start to think and be serious about investing in their future and getting out of that cycle that's been following their family?
Absolutely. Look, it's a cycle that I was absolutely a part of. And I think that I'll be the first generation to inherit wealth. And for many Latinos, that's going to be true. So we need to really understand, what does that look like? And how do I use that influx of capital or cash coming in when we have that transfer of wealth? One of the most important things you can do, especially even as a young family, is to get life insurance. Life insurance is a tool for building intergenerational wealth. And oftentimes families don't like to think about it because obviously no one wants to think about death. But what we need to start thinking about is legacy. So how do we build the legacy, especially in communities of color? Latino families have such a long history of legacy. We have intergenerational families living together. We have businesses, we have homes. So we need to think about how do we protect those. Life insurance is one of the ways that we protect those things. The other is thinking about estate planning. And it's really not too early to think about it. Really, you should be thinking about it in your late 30s, early 40s, because it is how we pass down our wealth and how we start thinking about how we give, for example. One of the things that we don't often think about, even in building wealth, is sort of what's our legacy around philanthropy and political giving. If you have an association with an organization, for example, or with an educational institution. So those kinds of things are being thought about when you're doing estate planning. But also thinking about your different types of accounts. You have a 401k, you have an IRA, and more often than not nowadays, you're going to have a brokerage account. Maybe you're young enough and you're investing in some crypto, and I hope you are. I hope you're careful, and I have lots of educational resources about that. But that's, those are the things that you want to start thinking about, how to not only build those assets, but then also protect them.
Ramona Ortega, CEO and founder of Mi Dinero, Mi Futuro. Thank you so much for joining us today. Some great advice and tips that you were able to give us.
Thank you.